The entire financial system is designed to gaslight us into thinking that things are getting better when in fact they're getting worse. And in this video, I want to go into this in depth. Let's get started. And the very first thing that I want to talk about, of course, is what exactly is gaslighting. So we can see here, manipulate someone using psychological methods into questioning their own sanity or powers of reasoning. I came across a post from this guy. He's an economist. He's supposed to know what he's talking about. He's supposed to know about the financial system. He's supposed to understand what's going on around him. And this is the post here. The notion of hollowing out the middle class is a myth. Official census data shows that from 1980 to 2021, real median family income skyrocketed by 50% from $67,000 to about $100,000, marking the largest gain in history. This surge is rooted in the Reagan era's embrace of free trade, lower tax rates, and technological advancement, a trend that continued under Clinton and Trump. Now, there are a few things here that stand out. So, the first thing that stands out is he seemed to have cherry picked the year 1980. And why did he do this? It's because something very important happened in 1980. We have to go into the basis of where this information is coming from. We can see here real median family income. Real means inflation adjusted. So what's happening here is the Federal Reserve is adjusting median incomes for inflation. So essentially, they're going based on inflation to see what the income should have been based on today's dollars. That's what real means. The opposite of real median family income would be nominal family income. The key here is that real median income means that it's inflation adjusted, and inflation is based on CPI. So the consumer price index. We can see here CPI is a measure of the average change over time in prices paid by consumers for a representative basket of goods and services. The CPI measures inflation as experienced by consumers in their day-to-day living expenses. So the way that Stephen was trying to gaslight you here is by telling you that you got wealthier when in reality, he missed out on very important data points. First of all, the CPI measure completely changed in 1983. So this number looks a lot better than it should. There was a change made to CPI in 1983. It was owner's equivalent rent. It changed the CPI calculations by shifting from using actual homeownership costs like mortgage payments and maintenance to measuring the rental value of the home. This change was implemented in 1983 and it focuses on the cost of shelter services provided by owner-occupied housing, similar to how rent is measured for renters. We can see here that OER or ownership equivalent rent is a completely falsified and made up number. It's calculated by estimating the rental value of a home that a homeowner would pay if they were renting it instead of owning it. So basically what they're doing is they're figuring out a hypothetical rental price that's used to represent the cost of housing consumption. And they do this by using a combination of surveys and market data to estimate this rental value rather than going to the market and checking what people are paying in rent every single month. They ask individual homeowners what they think that their home should be rented out for. So they ask people who own their home and are paying a mortgage how much they would expect to pay in rent for their home. And this right here is a completely skewed number because let's say if you had a home for 10 years or 15 years, you're going to be paying a mortgage based on whatever payment you set up 15 or 10 years ago. Your payment is very likely going to be much, much lower than the market rent rate. The way that this is used to manipulate numbers is that people who are paying a mortgage probably don't care what the rental rate in their area is. So what they're going to do is they're going to get a much lower number for owner's equivalent rent than the actual number would be. So if we go back to this post here, we can see official census data shows that from 1980 to 2021, so he specifically picked 1980 to 2021, real median family income skyrocketed by 50%. So if you're using a manipulated number to calculate what inflation adjusted family income is, then of course you're going to get better numbers if that's your goal. One of the reasons why CPI is intentionally manipulated downward is because CPI is a way for the government, for the US government, to figure out how much they should be paying in Social Security. A higher CPI inflation number means that the US government has to pay more for Social Security, and it's already not able to afford all of its expenses. So if Social Security goes up more with CPI, that means that the US is going to have to go further into debt because it has to borrow money to make the payments that it has to make. The US federal tax revenue is only $5.1 trillion, dollars, while their spending is $7.1 trillion. Dollars. They're adding $2 trillion dollars worth of debt each year. This number is going to keep increasing. The US national debt will keep rising. The US government has already paid $5.4 trillion dollars in interest, and it has $103 trillion dollars of unfunded liabilities. So it owes $103 trillion dollars in the coming years to anybody who's supposed to get benefits from them. So let's say for Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security. So if CPI is really high, the US government has to pay more for Social Security. It has to pay more for interest because the interest rate on debt goes up. The US government has to borrow even more money, and it has to keep adding more and more treasuries to the economy. What this means is that the Fed has to step in and buy more of the US national debt in case nobody else wants to buy it. So a lower CPI number means that Social Security payments don't increase as much over time, and anybody who's relying on Social Security may not be able to make ends meet. Keep in mind that the people earning Social Security may not have any other jobs, and this could be their only source of income. So let's say if you get $2,000 a month from Social Security, you have to pay $1,500 in rent, you have $500 to pay for everything else in your life. So while the US government benefits from having a lower CPI inflation number, the people who are getting these benefits are the ones who miss out. I put together some data here that shows you the monthly Social Security benefit and how much it's increased over time. We can see here in the 1950s, it increased by 4% per year. CPI in this decade was 2%. In the 1960s, it increased by 4% per year, 4.4% per year. CPI was 2.3%. In the 1970s, it increased by 6.8% per year, but CPI was 7.1%. In the 1980s, it increased by 5.2% per year, but CPI was 5.1%. In the 1990s, it increased by 2.9% per year. So the benefit per month increased by 2.9% per year, but CPI was 3%. In the 2000s, it increased by 3.2%, but CPI reported was 2.6%. And in the 2010s, the benefit increased by 2.5% per year, and the CPI was reported at 1.8%. I also put together some data here that shows how much the prices of staple items, things that we use on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, have increased over time. So we can see here the median home price went from $10,000 in 1953 to $348,000 in 2021. In 1980, the price was $47,200. In 2021, the price was $348,000. We can see here that that's an increase of 637% from 1980 to 2021 for the median home price. And CPI only reflects a 230% increase for owner's equivalent rent. And this is how they gaslight you. Even though owning your house got more expensive, even though your property taxes went up, your maintenance costs went up, they don't account for that. What they account for is some random number that they come up with from surveys, from calling people, from people who have had their houses for years and they have no idea what the market rate of housing should be. And they stick that number into CPI, lowering the total CPI inflation rate. The crazy thing here is that housing is about 30% of CPI. It's one of the biggest categories for CPI inflation calculations. So if you wanted to buy a house, CPI inflation doesn't apply to you. You have to look at asset inflation. Asset inflation is the increase in the median price of the house. What CPI accounts for is just the time value of owning that house temporarily. This is a complete manipulation of the numbers because if CPI included the median house price, it would be much, much higher. I found this data from multiple sources. It's about the same from everywhere. There are some differences, of course, but it's pretty similar. The important thing that I want to show you here is what percentage of a home your nominal median family income would have bought over the decades. So we can see here. In 1953, the nominal median family income bought 42% of a house. So the nominal median income was $4,200. The median house price was $10,000. In 1960, that income bought 44% of a house. So it went up slightly. Then in 1970, it bought 58% of a house. Then in 1980, it bought less. It bought 44%. Then 1990, it stayed about the same. In 2000, it dropped to 42%. The nominal median family income was $50,732, and a house cost $119,000. In the 2000s, this number dropped significantly. So the family income didn't increase as much, while prices of houses increased significantly. So in 2010, the nominal median family income was 27% of the price of a house, and in 2021, it was 23% of the price of a house. If you look at these numbers as a percentage, they're absolutely insane. From 1953 to 2021, the median home price went up by 3,380% cumulatively. Price of gas went up 1,000%. The price of a new car went up 2,116%. The price of a movie ticket went up 1,800%. Dozen eggs went up 221%. A loaf of bread went up 1,500%. Postage stamp went up 1,800%. College tuition, this one's crazy, 5,000% in that period. And until 2025, it's up 10,000%. And then average monthly rent, this is another crazy one. It went up 1,700%. From 1980 to 2021, it was 460%, but CPI data only accounts for 335%. Another problem with CPI is that it doesn't account for switches to cheaper alternatives. So let's say you go for a processed food over a whole food because the processed food is much cheaper. CPI is going to change. If the majority of people consume the processed food, it's going to swap the processed food for the whole food. Processed foods obviously get cheaper over time because of economies of scale, meaning that CPI data is skewed downward. Another manipulative tactic here is they don't account for car prices increasing. What they do is something called a hedonic adjustment. So if you get more features in a car, what they're going to do is they're going to make it so that it seems like your price of that car is decreasing. Even though the price of a new car went from $7,200 in 1980 to $41,000 in 2021, they only accounted for an 85% increase, while the actual number increased by 469%. In the data set that I got from the second source, the median house price was slightly different, so I did another calculation here. I also included the nominal median individual income. We can see here for individuals, the price of a house went from 415% of their annual income to 934% of their annual income. So the price of a house is almost 10 times the nominal median individual income. If we divide the median home price by the median family income, in 1953, it was 227%. So the house was 2.27 times your median family income. And in 2021, it was 416%. So it was 4.16 times the median family income. So if you divide 357,000 here, the price of a house in 2021, by 85,806, you get 416%. And I'm going to point out a few more problems with CPI here. And CPI, keep in mind, is what all of these governments are using to set up entitlements for Social Security or to see whether or not people are becoming more prosperous. So, more problems here. The basket of goods that they use for CPI calculations isn't the same for everyone. So, if you consume different things, if you consume whole foods instead of processed foods, your basket is going to be much more expensive and your CPI estimate is going to be higher. CPI also doesn't account for shrinkflation, where the package gets smaller and the amount of whatever you're getting in that package, let's say whatever that consumable item is, the amount is getting smaller, but the price is going up. So let's say if you're buying meat, you may have gone from getting 150 grams for $3 to 100 grams for $3. The next one, quality can decrease, but it's not captured by CPI. And that's what this part is here. We can see here it doesn't account for switches to cheaper alternatives. If you buy the cheaper item, CPI just assumes that you're doing it because you want to. Next one, it doesn't account for how many hours the earners have to work to earn this higher income. And I did some calculations on this as well. The number of dual income families has just increased over time. In 1953, 70% of households were single income earners in the US, while 30% were dual income earners. And in 2023, it was 40% single income versus 60% dual income. So while the family income number increased, the real family income number, more people had to work to earn that income. So what they were doing is they were putting more hours towards working just to make ends meet. We can see here tech improvements lead to an understatement of CPI. So if your phone gets better over time, what they're going to consider is that your price of your phone went down. Even though you're paying more, the price went down. That's what CPI accounts for. Processed foods are replacing raw ingredients because there's a slower price growth for processed materials. You can mass produce them. Fake meat is potentially replacing real meat. Poultry replaced red meat. Organic to non-organic. So what we're seeing here is that the quality of everything is getting worse while prices are rising or staying the same. CPI does not reflect this. It shows you that all of these substitutions are made by choice when the people who are making these substitutions may just be forced to make them because they can't afford anything else. We can see here how much your purchasing power decreased according to CPI. $1 in 1953 is the equivalent of $10.30 in 2021. So this is a total loss in purchasing power of 90%. So if we go back to this post here, we can see numbers were completely cherry picked. They were intentionally chosen based on what happened to CPI calculations. Real median family income is a completely fake number. It's not even real, it's completely fake. And the very first line here is where the manipulation comes in. You might be seeing in your own personal life that your cost of living is going up, but Stephen wants you to believe that your experience, your lived experience, is fake. Even though the middle class is being squeezed, Stephen wants you to believe that that's not true. It's a complete myth. And we can see here that some people did fall for the manipulation. This person said here, I wish I could retweet this 100 times. But most people thankfully don't believe this because they're seeing the problems in their own personal lives. We can see here, I bought a Coke and a bag of pretzels at the carryout and it cost over $7 yesterday. What would that have cost in 1980? Probably $1. This person here, of course, fell for the manipulation. This debunks the lie of the hollowed out middle class with data. And this is the problem here. The majority of people see somebody like Steven, who's 65 years old. He has a respected job. He has 100,000 followers, and they believe what he has to say. But the problem here is that Steven is using manipulated data. Like I showed you, CPI is fake. CPI doesn't show you the real numbers. CPI considers housing to be an investment when housing is supposed to be shelter. It's not supposed to be an investment. We've been manipulated for decades. We've been told that the cost of living isn't going up as much as we think it is, when the reality is that we see the money coming out of our wallets and we see how much the cost of living is actually going up. Over the last 2 to 3 years, my groceries have increased in price by about 30 to 40%, and that's not accounted for in CPI. I'm sure other people are experiencing exactly the same thing, but Steven doesn't want you to believe that it's true. I think the only solution to this problem here is to save in Bitcoin. If you save in dollars, if you save in stocks, you're going to believe that you're getting wealthier, but you're not actually getting wealthier because your purchasing power is decreasing. CPI should be much, much higher. Right now, it's reported at about 2 to 3% when it should be 9, 10, 11%. The reality is that our cost of living should be decreasing over time because we get better at producing goods and services. Over time, the price of a house should be decreasing because we get better at making houses and people become specialized in making houses. We learn certain techniques that makes it easier for us to build houses, that makes it cheaper, that gets it done quicker. But in reality, the price of housing is going up. Why is that? It's because the entire financial system is fake. It's based on fake money. And this is where Bitcoin comes in. Bitcoin is a form of money that can't be manipulated. Nobody can create more of it out of thin air. The only way to create more of it is to dedicate time, energy, and effort to the Bitcoin network. There are only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, while on the other hand, there is an unlimited number of US dollars that can exist. This manipulation from the government, from economists, is going to continue forever. As long as you keep listening to them, they're going to keep trying to squeeze you dry. They're going to keep telling you that your cost of living isn't increasing as much as you're experiencing it going up. They're going to blame you for buying real food instead of the processed garbage that's available in every store. They're going to add fake numbers to their inflation calculations, and they're going to tell you that your inflation isn't as high as you are experiencing. This entire system is designed to keep us broke, to keep us working forever, to keep us in debt. The only solution to this, the only way to get out of the rat race, the only way to get out of this financial system is to save in Bitcoin. I strongly suggest that you start studying Bitcoin and you buy Bitcoin before governments and financial institutions start accumulating as much as they possibly can. Right now, there's only a handful of companies and governments accumulating Bitcoin, but over time, this number is going to go up until every company and government has some Bitcoin. Accumulating some Bitcoin right now will be the best financial decision you make. Bitcoin is not designed to manipulate you. Bitcoin is not designed to gaslight you, while the current financial system is specifically designed for that.